What if I told you that the most powerful army Hitler ever feared never fired a single shot, that the force that held the German panzer divisions paralyzed for weeks? The military might that haunted the 4S nightmares and changed the entire course of World War II was nothing but rubber, wood, and lies. In the spring of 1944, as Europe held its breath under the shadow of Nazi occupation, Adolf Hitler knew the inevitable was coming. The Allied invasion, the Great Reckoning. His intelligence officers worked day and night, analyzing every piece of information, every intercepted transmission, every espionage report. They studied the coastline, calculated troop movements, predicted landing zones. The Wehrmacht fortified the Atlantic Wall with millions of tons of concrete and steel. Hitler positioned his elite divisions ready to crush the invasion the moment it began. He was prepared for everything, except one thing: the truth. While the German High Command pored over maps in their bunkers, Rommel inspected the beach defenses, and Hitler, in turn, planned a counteroffensive that would repel the Allies back to sea. They all contemplated a masterpiece of deception, so brilliant, so audacious, that even today military historians struggle to comprehend its magnitude. You already know D-Day. You've seen the films, heard the stories of Omaha Beach, of the paratroopers jumping in the darkness, of the longest day that broke the backbone of the Third Reich. But what you haven't heard is the story behind the story, the secret operation that made it all possible. Stay with me until the end, because what I'm about to show you isn't just another World War II story. This is the story of the greatest military deception in human history. An operation so secret that not even most Allied soldiers knew of its existence. A phantom force commanded by America's most feared general, equipped with an arsenal that could be emptied with a pin, supported by an air force, created in a Hollywood studio. Imagine this: thousands of tanks advancing through the English countryside, entire air bases teeming with bombers and fighter planes, landing craft crowding the ports, radio communications, flooding the airwaves with orders, coordinates, and battle plans. German reconnaissance planes, photographing everything. Spy networks reporting troop concentrations, all confirming Hitler's worst fears, except none of it was real. The tanks were inflatable balloons. The planes were painted plywood. The landing craft were props. The radio messages were staged. And the army? A ghost. How can an army that never existed change the course of history? How can you convince the most paranoid military mind of the 20th century that its greatest threat is concentrating in one place when the real danger is preparing to strike in a completely different location? You already know that wars are won with weapons, bombs, and soldiers. But what you're about to discover is that sometimes, just sometimes, wars are won with something far more powerful: imagination, deception, and the willingness to bet everything on an impossible lie. The operation had a code name: Operation Fortitude. And in 1944, as the fate of civilization hung by a thread, a small group of intelligence officers, artists, actors, and spies began to construct the most elaborate hoax ever conceived. They didn't just fool Hitler, they fooled his entire war machine. They created an alternate reality, so convincing that German forces were waiting in the wrong place at the wrong time, while the real invasion carved its way into Fortress Europe like a surgical strike. What you are about to discover may surprise you, because it wasn't about technology or firepower. It was about understanding that, in war, as in life, perception can be more powerful than reality, that sometimes the greatest weapon is not the one you see, it's the one you believe exists. So, allow me to take you back to 1944, to the shadows where this secret war was fought, where magicians became generals and lies became legends. Before we delve deeper into this incredible story, I want to pause for a moment, because the fact is, covert operations like this were meant to remain buried forever. The men and women who orchestrated Operation Fortitude took their secrets to the grave. Documents remained classified for decades. The true extent of this deception was almost lost to history. Almost what saved these stories from oblivion wasn't just historians scouring archives. It was people like you, people who care enough to seek the truth behind the headlines, who want to understand the hidden mechanisms of history that textbooks never teach. And that's exactly why this channel exists, to bring these hidden operations to light, to honor the unsung heroes who changed the world in the shadows. But I need you to understand this. Channels like this, dedicated to unearthing these forgotten chapters of history, live and die by your engagement. Every view, every like, every comment sends a signal that this content matters, that these stories deserve to be told. When you click the like button, you're not just clicking an icon, you're voting and saying, yes, keep investigating, keep revealing, keep bringing these hidden truths to light. If this topic resonates with you, if you're fascinated by the secret wars fought in the shadows, leave a comment below about what attracts you to these stories. Is it the deception, the genius behind the strategy, the fact that ordinary people orchestrated extraordinary lies that change history? I read every comment, and honestly, your perspectives often reveal angles I had never considered. You're not just a spectator. You're part of this investigation. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now is the time. Because Operation Fortitude is just one thread in a vast web of classified operations, secret missions, and military secrets that have been kept from the public eye for generations. Your participation here is what makes this channel grow and reach more people with this type of content. Each subscription indicates to the algorithm that these hidden chapters of history matter, that there is an audience eager for the truth behind the propaganda, for the reality behind the myth. So, let's go. Click the subscribe button, leave a like, leave a comment telling me what you think so far, because we're just getting started. The rabbit hole is much deeper than you imagine, and what comes next, the details of how they actually built this phantom army, how they convinced Hitler's intelligence network, how they used Hollywood magic and radio ghosts to rewrite the destiny of Europe. That's where the story gets really mind-blowing. To understand the audacity of what the Allies were about to accomplish, one must imagine Europe in early 1944. The entire continent was a fortress. Hitler had spent years transforming the French coastline into what he called the Atlantic Wall, a seemingly impenetrable barrier of concrete bunkers, artillery positions, machine gun nests, minefields, and anti-tank obstacles stretching from Norway to Spain. Millions of tons of steel and concrete, hundreds of thousands of soldiers. It wasn't just a defensive line, it was a statement of power. Hitler believed it was unbreakable. And honestly, looking at the numbers, at the sheer scale of the fortification, it was understandable why he was so confident. But here's the truth about war, about any high-stakes confrontation. Really, the strongest defense always has a fatal vulnerability: certainty. The moment you are absolutely certain of what's coming is when you become most exposed. Hitler knew the invasion was coming. His intelligence services had confirmed it through numerous channels. Spy networks throughout Britain reported massive troop buildups. Reconnaissance flights photographed harbors filling with landing crafts, intercepted communications passed with preparation orders. The Allies didn't even try to hide it. They couldn't. You can't assemble the largest amphibious invasion force in human history without someone noticing. Therefore, Hitler didn't question whether the invasion would happen. He had only one crucial question that kept him awake at night, that drove his generals into endless strategic sessions that consumed all the intelligence resources of the Third Reich. Where would they attack? This was the ultimate high-stakes guessing game, and the consequences of a mistake would be catastrophic. If Hitler concentrated his forces in the right place, if he positioned his panzer divisions exactly where the first landing craft reached the beaches, he could turn the water red in a matter of hours. He could annihilate the invasion before it even gained ground, push the Allies back into the English Channel, and potentially prolong the war for years. But if he was wrong, if he positioned his best troops in the wrong sector, the Allies would flood the breach like water through a broken dam, and Fortress Europe would open up completely. The entire fate of the war, millions of lives, the future of civilization itself, all depended on this single geographical question. One decision, one location. If he got it right, Hitler could still win. If he got it wrong, the Third Reich would begin its collapse. The Allies understood this psychology perfectly. They knew Hitler was searching for the answer, analyzing every fragment of information, trying to decipher his intentions. And then someone had a truly brilliant idea, a shift in thinking that would change everything. Instead of trying to hide their invasion plans, what if they gave Hitler exactly what he was looking for? What if they handed him the answer on a silver platter? But the answer would be a lie. A beautiful, elaborate, meticulously constructed lie, so convincing that Hitler's paranoid intelligence network would swallow it whole. This is where Operation Fortitude was born. Not in a command post on the battlefield, but in the shadowy world of MI5, the British Counterintelligence Service, and SHAEF, the Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force. These weren't just military planners. They were experts in psychological warfare, masters of deception who understood that in modern warfare, perception shapes reality. Their plan was impressive in its scope and utterly insane in its ambition. They would convince Hitler that the main Allied invasion force was concentrating in southeast England, directly across the English Channel opposite Pas-de-Calais, the narrowest point between Britain and France. It made perfect strategic sense. Pas-de-Calais was the obvious choice. Shortest distance, easiest to supply, closest to the heart of Germany. All tactical analysis pointed there. Hitler's own generals expected the invasion to happen there. So, that was exactly what the Allies would give him. Except the real invasion would hit Normandy, almost 300 kilometers to the west, where German defenses were weakest, where Hitler least expected it. But this is where things get really crazy. You can't just tell Hitler you're invading Calais and expect him to believe it. Hitler wasn't an idiot. He was paranoid, suspicious, and surrounded by intelligence officers specifically trained to detect Allied deception. To sustain this lie, the Allies would need to create something so gigantic, so detailed, so completely convincing that even the most skeptical German analyst would examine the evidence and conclude that Calais was the target. They needed to build an entire army. An army so real that German spy planes would photograph it. So real that radio intercepts would confirm it. So real that double agents would risk their lives to expose it. There was just one small problem. This army wouldn't exist. Welcome to the Ghost Army. the phantom force that would haunt Hitler's nightmares and change the course of history. Imagine the scene. Across the fields of southeast England, a massive military mobilization begins. Hundreds of tanks take up positions. Fighter planes and bombers crowd the air bases. Landing craft gather in the ports. Fuel depots, ammunition depots, barracks, command centers everywhere, appearing exactly where German reconnaissance expected to find them before a massive invasion of Calais. German pilots flew overhead, photographing everything. Spies on the ground counted the vehicles, estimated the number of troops, and sent detailed reports to Berlin. Everything confirmed Hitler's suspicions. The invasion was underway in Calais, but if you approached one of those tanks and touched it, your hand would sink in. Because it wasn't made of steel, it was made of rubber. An inflatable balloon painted to look like a Sherman tank. If you were to climb aboard one of those fearsome bombers at the airfield, you'd discover it was built entirely of wood and canvas, a movie prop that couldn't fly a meter without collapsing. The landing craft in the harbors, stage sets, the fuel depots, empty cartridges. The entire army was theater, a Hollywood production disguised as military might.
And this is where the operation becomes almost comical in its genius. The Allies hired set designers from the British film industry, artists, and prop makers specializing in creating realistic illusions for the screen. These creative minds suddenly found themselves involved in the most important production of their lives. They learned how tanks cast shadows, how airplanes reflected sunlight, how to make inflatable rubber look like hardened steel at 1,500 meters altitude. They became masters of illusion, building an arsenal that existed only in the eyes of the beholder. German reconnaissance planes captured thousands of photographs, all showing exactly what Hitler wanted to see. But reality and perception had divorced, and Hitler was married to the wrong bride. But even the most elaborate scenario needs actors, and this production demanded a protagonist, someone whose mere presence would validate the entire charade, someone Hitler feared so much that just seeing his name associated with this phantom army would dispel any doubt. Enter General George S. Patton, the very old blood and courage, the most aggressive, brilliant, and terrifying American commander in the European theater of operations. Hitler's intelligence services had identified Patton as the most dangerous Allied general, a tactical genius whose Third Army had devastated North Africa and Sicily like a chainsaw cuts paper. If anyone was going to lead the main invasion, Hitler believed it would be Patton. Thus, the Allies appointed Patton commander of FUSAG, the First Army Group of the United States, the enormous invasion force that was gathering in southeast England. They held ceremonies. Patton gave speeches. His presence was documented, photographed, reported by spies. The Germans watched him like hawks, tracking his every move, convinced that wherever Patton was, the hammer would fall. The impact of this casting choice cannot be underestimated. Patton's reputation was so formidable, his tactical brilliance so respected even by his enemies, that his assignment to Fusag instantly validated the entire operation in the eyes of the Germans. If Patton was there, the invasion had to be real. Except Fusag didn't exist. It was all a smokescreen with Patton as the central figure on the poster. But the Allies weren't content with inflatable tanks and a famous general. They understood that modern warfare is based on information, on signals intelligence, on invisible radio communication that intelligence services intercept and analyze. So, they created phantom transmissions, fake radio traffic mimicking the communications of a huge army preparing for an invasion. Operators sent thousands of coded messages, maintaining perfect radio discipline, using proper protocols, discussing supply chains, troop movements, weather conditions, all the mundane details that make military communication authentic. German listening posts intercepted everything, and their analysts had no reason to doubt what they were hearing. The patterns matched, the volume matched. Everything pointed to a massive force preparing to attack Calais. And then there were the double agents. the human elements of this elaborate charade, the actors who played the most dangerous roles. British intelligence had achieved something remarkable. They captured virtually all the German spies operating in Great Britain and recruited them, convincing them to work for the Allies while sending false information to Berlin. The crown jewel of this network was a Spanish double agent codenamed Garbo, considered by some historians to be the greatest spy of World War II. Garbo created an entire fictitious network of subagents, each reporting on different aspects of Allied mobilization. His reports were so detailed, so consistent, so valuable that the Germans awarded him the Iron Cross. They trusted him completely, and every word he sent was a carefully crafted lie, reinforcing the charade of Operation Fortitude. Through Garbo and others like him, the Allies controlled the flow of information to German intelligence, creating a false reality so convincing that Hitler's analysts never questioned it. This is where the tension becomes almost unbearable, as the end of May gave way to the beginning of June 1944. Two parallel realities coexisted. In southeast England, the Ghost Army maintained its elaborate charade. RADIO operators continued their false broadcasts. Inflatable tanks were ready for combat. Patton was visible, and in action everything indicated that Calais was the target. But 300 kilometers to the west, in the ports and fields of southwest England, the true invasion force was gathering. Thousands of real ships, hundreds of thousands of real soldiers, the largest amphibious assault force ever assembled in human history, preparing to land on the beaches of Normandy. And Hitler had no idea. All his strategic focus remained fixed on Calais, his best panzer divisions positioned to crush an invasion that would never happen. The moment of truth was approaching, and the Allies had successfully created a parallel universe in Hitler's mind, a false reality that would cost him everything. On June 6, 1944, as the first landing craft reached the beaches of Normandy as American soldiers stormed Omaha Beach under deadly fire as British and Canadian forces advanced inland through heavily defended positions, Hitler faced the shock of his military career. Reports flooded the German high command. Allied forces were landing in Normandy. But Hitler, looking at his maps, analyzing information from his spy network, reviewing the troop concentrations his reconnaissance had photographed in Calais, made a decision that would seal the fate of Nazi Germany. He believed Normandy was a diversion, a diversionary maneuver. The real invasion, the main assault with Patton's massive Fusag army, was yet to come in Calais. He ordered his commanders to hold their positions. He refused to release the panzer divisions stationed near Calais, the armored reserves that could potentially have repelled the Allies back to the sea if they had been immediately sent to Normandy. 4 weeks, while Allied forces captured beachheads and advanced inland, Hitler continued to wait for the real invasion that never came. When he finally realized the truth, that he had been staring at ghosts while the real army entered through the front door, it was too late. The Allies had established an unshakable position. Fortress Europe had fallen. Operation Fortitude was not merely a military maneuver of deception. It was a masterpiece of psychological warfare. A demonstration that sometimes the most powerful weapon is not the one that destroys, but the one that deceives. The Phantom Army saved thousands of Allied lives, keeping German reinforcements away from Normandy during the critical first weeks. It shortened the war by months, possibly years, and it proved something profound about the very nature of reality, that what we believe shapes what we see. That perception, when properly manipulated, becomes indistinguishable from truth. Those rubber tanks, wooden planners, and false radio transmissions had a greater impact on the outcome of World War II than entire divisions of real soldiers. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because the revelations don't stop with the success of the operation. The consequences, the hidden truths that emerged decades later when confidential files were finally opened, reveal layers of deception even more intricate than anyone imagined. The human stories behind this operation, the individuals who risked everything to maintain the lie, the artists who became warriors, the spies who played both sides. Their journeys through this secret war expose something essential about courage, creativity, and the thin line between genius and madness. Comment below. Deception wins wars.